views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Open 2.0. Today, we will be talking with the co-founders of the Asian Mythbusters Project, Olivia Wong and Reena Chang. The Asian Mythbusters Project, or AMP, busts myths about the AAPI and raise awareness about the AAPI community. Olivia and Reena, welcome to the show.
Hi, it's
Thank
nice
you.
to be here. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great to have you guys on the show. First, Reena will give a speech called Erasure and Ignorance. Reena, take it away.
Yes, thank you. So before we begin, it's important to understand that racism against Asians is fundamentally different from racism against other people of color. The root of racism against Asians, whether it be violent attacks or unintentional slander, stems from erasure and ignorance. As our name, the Asian Mythbusters Project suggests, we are dedicated to busting myths regarding Asian Americans. Many of you may be familiar with the most obvious one, the model minority myth. It goes like this: Asians are privileged. Asians don't face racism. Asians are wealthy. Asians are smart. Let's tackle this one by one. 1. Asians don't face racism. Ladies and gentlemen, I wouldn't be here to speak to you today if we didn't face racism. 2. Asians are wealthy. Think crazy rich Asians. The thing is, the numbers say otherwise. In fact, 12.3% of Asian Americans live below the federal poverty level. In 2014, Asian Americans represented 17.9% of people living in poverty in New York City and had the highest poverty rate of any racial or ethnic group at a whopping 29%. To make things worse, Asian Americans are often underrepresented in data and surveys. According to the Pew Research Center, there is a high margin of error when sampling Asian Americans given their small population and wide diversity in smaller samples. Even in large surveys, limited English proficiency and high linguistic and ethnic diversity make it difficult to have a representative sample of Asian Americans. 3. All Asians are smart. You know the stereotype, Chinese kids are human calculators. This is not true. Not only is it false, but it is harmful. When society places such a high expectation on you, it hurts to fall short. I have some Asian friends who aren't geniuses, who aren't good at math. Sometimes they can feel ashamed or even a little useless. This is like the Asian version of toxic masculinity. So it seems like my work here is done. We've done the myth busting, so it's time to go home now. No, it would be irresponsible of me to leave it like this. Let me explain how the model minority myth is actually harmful. If you take it at face value, this is a very positive image. Up until recently, I was even proud of it. Why then is it a problem? The problem is exactly this. People think that Asians have everything. People think that Asians don't have any problems, not to mention racism. This mindset has resulted in erasure and ignorance. The sad reality is that Asian Americans simply get ignored. The history of racism that we have faced in the US has been simplified to the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 and the Japanese internment camps. Most Americans are not aggressive racists, but are silent bystanders. Anyone who has ever been to an anti-bullying workshop knows that bystanding is harmful. We can attribute the weakness of the response to racism against Asian Americans to this bystander mentality. This is because numbers are power. As we have seen in any civil rights or social justice movement, such as the recent BLM movement this summer, you need widespread support and activism to get your movement on the map and to make progress. When most activists for Asian Americans are Asian and we don't have a strong non-Asian ally base, there's not much we can do. Some of you may call me a pessimist. While it is true that we've had some successful movements, you cannot deny that we have been largely ignored by others until recently. I say that the crisis hasn't reached mainstream media until the Atlanta shootings. The fact of the matter is that every successful civil rights movement needs strong support and large publicity. We do not have this. This is what we call erasure. Furthermore, the gross simplification of one of the most diverse racial groups in America has resulted in widespread ignorance. When you remember that the model minority myth itself is false, the situation gets even worse. However, the model minority myth is not the only cause of such ignorance. I've talked a lot about the positive perception of Asian Americans, but it's time for me to address the flip side. I'm sure we've all seen racist caricatures or cartoons of Asian people. The Corona Ching Chan Does a Little Dance video from the early pandemic still sits fresh in my mind. This translates into actions. The Japanese internment camps, the Chinese massacre of 1871, the 3,800 Asian hate incidents just last year. Before I break this down for you, know this: ignorance causes hate. Let's examine each of these examples. I first presented the Japanese internment camps. The American government imprisoned Japanese Americans in these internment camps after the bombing of Pearl Harbor under the premise that all Japanese Americans were loyal to Japan and were therefore prone to treason and espionage. This is ignorant. These people were true Americans, American citizens even. Some had never even been to Japan before. This ties into another big assumption that all Asians are the same. That is a whole other story. Then I mentioned the Chinese massacre of 1871. 18 Chinese people were killed in Los Angeles in a riot, and none of the murderers were convicted of any crime. What caused these murders? Ignorance. In 1869, the Los Angeles News and the Los Angeles Star started publishing editorials against Chinese immigration that described Chinese people as inferior and immoral. These articles did not cause Asian hate, but they reflected the public attitude towards the Chinese. Do these ideas sound familiar? Some of you may be thinking of Trump's stance on immigration. These people are taking our jobs, they're dangerous, they're criminals, they're un-American. Every single one of these statements is false and ignorant. Such xenophobia is irrational and rooted in little to no factual evidence. Ignorance strikes again. Finally, I gave you the shocking statistic. There have been 3,800 Asian hate incidents just last year. This huge spike in Asian hate crimes is in response to COVID-19. As logical racists have concluded, the virus originated from China, so naturally, it is every Asian American's fault that we are in this mess. No, this is ignorant. We are not responsible for the coronavirus. We did not bring it to the US. We are not vectors of the disease, and we do not deserve this kind of punishment. Now, some of you may be thinking, aren't we here to talk about the model minority myth? You're right. Allow me to explain how such a seemingly positive perception of Asians has resulted in this extreme hate. As I explained earlier, the model minority myth leads to erasure. As a result, these crimes don't receive much attention from the media. When these crimes are not condemned, when these crimes go unreported, the criminals are emboldened. They don't face the consequences. Who cares if I punch an Asian? Again, it's the same issue of bystanding. Listen closely. Bystanding is endorsing. Do not be a bystander to Asian hate. Do not endorse Asian hate. It's that simple. The Atlanta shootings brought this issue to national attention, but that is only the tip of the iceberg. Even now, I could argue that the attention is waning. If we don't do anything, we are going to be forgotten again until the next great tragedy. It's time to make change. We cannot stop fighting. We cannot stop forcing people to see the crimes that have been committed against Asian Americans. Here at the Asian Mythbusters Project, one of our main series is the Anti-Asian Attack Alert, or the Quad A. If any of you check out our Instagram page, you will notice a sea of red, although we are starting to mix in some new colors. These are summaries of recent Asian hate crimes that we try to post as soon as we get the news. I'm actually in charge of combing the news to find these articles. Now, I'll let you in on what goes on behind the scenes here at AMP. Every day, and I mean every day, I will find a news article about an Asian hate crime. Sometimes I'll find 2. Sometimes I'll find 3. Every single day. I was already fairly educated on the subject before we started AMP, but this deep research shocked me. To read about hate crimes committed against your own race every single day is heartbreaking. To know that you could be the next victim, to know that your family could be the next victim, to know that your friends could be the next victim is terrifying. My family lives in constant fear of being attacked. We're the only Asian household in our neighborhood. We've installed extra locks on our bedroom doors. We've purchased 2 hiking sticks and a dagger. We are constantly on high alert when we go outside. Whenever my mom sees anyone approaching her, she starts running just in case. My partner Olivia has had similar experiences. She told me the other day that her mother learned some self-defense moves and is teaching her family how to protect themselves. This is no way to live. What are we doing to respond to these problems? As I've said before, the foundation of anti-Asian racism is ignorance and erasure. The Asian Mythbusters Project was founded to address these 2 problems. As our name suggests, we bust myths. We aim to post a large myth-busting or educational post once a week to combat such ignorance. To overcome erasure, we post our Quad A series pretty much every day, given the sheer quantity of Asian hate crimes. However, we are only a team of 2 high schoolers. Our actions alone cannot erase Asian hate. Like I said, numbers are power. We need widespread support and a strong base of Asian and non-Asian people. This is where you come in. Follow us on Instagram at Asian_Mythbusters_project. Share our post, like our post, maybe drop a comment. I hate to sound like a YouTuber begging for subscribers, but we do need your help. Anyone who is familiar with Instagram story dynamics knows that sharing informative posts is a great way to disseminate information. Of course, we do not speak for all Asian Americans, and we are not the only outlet of education on the matter, but we are definitely trying to help. Beyond AMP, we ask you to use your own voices to help. Even if you're not Asian, your words and your actions are still invaluable. At the end of the day, will you be another silent bystander and endorse Asian hate, or will you do something to help us? That is up to you. Thank you.
Wow, that was a fantastic speech. Thank you for that.
Hi, my name is Grace, and to start off with the first question, can you guys introduce yourselves and your role in AMP?
Sure. So hi, my name is Reena Chen. I'm the founder of the Asian Mythbusters project, and I write our posts and I do the research. It actually takes a lot more research to run an informative Instagram account than you think. So for the Quad A, my mom and I check the news every day. I typically find between 1 to 3 news articles a day, which I send to Olivia. And for the big educational posts, I have to decide on a topic and do some serious research. I never use less than 3 sites when I do research to find this information to write about it. And after I write up the draft, Olivia works her magic.
Hi, my name is Olivia, and I am a co-founder and graphic designer for AMP. This means I design all the posts you see on our Instagram page, from our Quad A series to our Mythbuster series. Some of you also might know me as one of the crew members of Open 2.0.
Hi, my name is Steve, and my question is, what inspired you to create the Asian Mythbusters project?
Right, so I was the one who actually came up with the idea. My decision to create AMP was like the culmination of my frustration, anger, and fear of anti-Asian racism in the pandemic. My mom is actually very informed on Asian hate crimes because she constantly checks Chinese American news. So as a result, she knows about pretty much every Asian hate crime in the US, which normally would not get covered in mainstream media. My mom also has this habit of telling us what she reads or watches over meals every day, so I hear a lot about Asian hate crimes through her. When the Atlanta shooting happened, I thought to myself, that's it. Then I contacted Olivia, one of my best friends, and we created AMP.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, personally, I also think that Asians haven't gotten sufficient media attention for decades. And now that we do have that attention, we need to take advantage of it in order to keep the public's eye on us and our struggles.
I think what you're doing is fantastic. Hi, my name is Dev, and could you tell us about what work you do for the Asian Mythbusters project?
Yeah, of course. So our first series is the Anti-Asian Attack series, or the Quad A. Whenever Reena gets word of a recent Asian hate crime, we immediately post a brief description of the event. We just wanted to force people just to see how many Asian hate crimes occur these days. This is also an issue of erasure because most people are only aware of 2 major anti-Asian hate crimes: the Atlanta shooting and that one about that Asian grandma beating up her attacker. We also have a weekly educational post. Those can be multiple slides and they address overarching issues that the Asian community faces. For example, we currently have a post on the sexualization and fetishization of Asian women, the chink slur, the myth that Asians created the coronavirus, and the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act. We also have a few series, although they're not really series yet because we didn't post more than one. Keep in mind that we've only been online for about 2 to 3 weeks, but we are aiming to post more. So we have the myth busting series, which is exactly what it sounds like. We also have the series Don't Say This in Asian, which covers racial slurs and microaggressions that are offensive to the Asian community that people just might not know about.
Yeah, and we also created a new series called A Word from the Community. We actually have a telonym in our bio where members of the Asian American community can send in their own experiences with racism or their thoughts on the issues that the Asian American community faces today. I think it's important to acknowledge that we're only a team of 2 high school students, so we can't represent the entirety of the Asian American community. So we wanted to open up the floor to more voices in the dialogue. And to our viewers out there, I suggest looking up our account, Asian_Mythbusters_project on our Instagram, and sending in your thoughts in the Tell Them in our bio.
Although the AMP covers a wide range of targets regarding the AAPI community, today we'll be focusing on two: AAPI diversity and the Asian American experience.
Can you define the term AAPI and who does it refer to?
Yeah, sure, that's a good question. AAPI stands for Asian American Pacific Islander.
Even though Asia is so diverse, why do most people think of East Asia whenever Asia is mentioned?
So to me, it's a matter of representation. Whenever you see Asians in the media, they're almost always going to be East Asian. Like the only time I ever see non-East Asian Asians on TV is for the Miss Universe pageant, which isn't a lot. So as a result of this serious lack of representation, people are programmed to believe that all Asians are East Asian, which is obviously wrong. In reality, there are over 4.5 billion people living in Asia, and there are 48 countries in Asia. And keep in mind that each country can have more than one ethnic group. And also, people often assume that all East Asians are Chinese, but even the term Chinese is not specific. Believe it or not, there are actually 56 ethnic groups in China alone, so you can only imagine how incredibly diverse the Asian continent is.
And just to add on to Reena, I honestly think this is also due to ignorance. Most people don't realize that Asia is so diverse, so they only think of East Asia. I think East Asia is also the region of Asia that's on the news the most. For example, when Trump was in office, we heard a lot about North Korea and their missiles, or like the trade wars with China.
Hi again. What are some dangers of not recognizing the diversity of Asia?
Right, so like we said earlier, people tend to assume that all Asians are East Asian or even just Chinese. So this is first-class ignorance, but it also ties into erasure. So when other Asian ethnicities are cropped out of the picture, their needs and their voices are left out of the dialogue. This poses an extreme risk to their own rights, especially when they don't get a chance to speak for themselves. Beyond that, it's also psychologically damaging to be erased from existence. I take great pride in my culture, and I cannot imagine how it would feel to be completely ignored.
And also on the flip side, there are benefits as being referred to as one big race. For example, Asian Americans could become one big voting bloc, and also it would be harder for us to present a unified front to make demands or address problems if we didn't even want to associate ourselves with one another. Overall, I think we need to make distinctions between simple ignorance and purposeful unification.
It sounds like not recognizing diversity in Asia can really be problematic. How can we educate people about Asia's diversity?
So you can actively correct your peers when they make the mistake of assuming that all Asians are East Asian or even just Chinese. You can also preemptively explain that not all Asians are East Asian before someone makes that mistake. So right now we're trapped in our houses with our families, so you can take the first step by educating them on the issue. But remember, before you correct other people, make sure that you educate yourself as well. I've often seen people correcting others by saying, you can't assume they're Chinese, they can be Japanese or Korean. So this is technically true, but notice how even the corrected version of the statement only addresses East Asians. This is what I call a partially educated response. Instead, you should educate yourself and give a better response.
Yeah, and just adding on to that, I think we need to dispel the misconception that all Asians have black hair, pale skin, and almond-shaped black eyes. Asia is literally an entire continent, as Reena explained earlier. So we can't expect everyone to look like this, especially since this description I just mentioned only fits East Asians.
Hi again. Thank you for the information. And what do you think it's like to be Asian in America?
Yeah, that's a good question. First, I just want to clarify that all my answers and all Reena's answers will be based on our own personal experiences, so we can't speak for all Asian Americans. And to answer your question, I once heard Asian Americans be described as perpetual foreigners. And I think many Americans see all Asians as immigrants, even though many of us, like me, have been here for a while. Asians are treated as immigrants just because we look different, and that's why we encounter ignorant racism due to this.
Yeah, and like the funny thing about this question is that there's no correct answer. Everyone's Asian American experience is unique. Even my own experience is very different from Olivia's, and we live in the same city.
Could you guys elaborate more specifically on each of your guys' personal experience?
Sure. So my parents are Chinese immigrants, and I was born in the US. I was raised in a fairly authentic Chinese style, so I'm fluent in Mandarin Chinese. I eat Chinese food at home. I was sent to Chinese cram schools and other extracurricular classes. And I'm also very proud of being Chinese. My favorite holiday is Lunar New Year. However, I'm also American. I cannot read or write Chinese. My Americanness was especially apparent to me when I went to China as a kid. My values and lifestyle were so different from those of my Chinese relatives. So here's a funny story. So for example, I sleep for 9 hours at night and stay awake the entire day. This is normal for us Americans, right? But on the other hand, my relatives sleep a few hours at night and nap a few hours in the day. And this is actually normal. So in fact, my cousin's lunchtime comes with a nap recess during which the students can take a nap at home. But beyond silly examples like this, I just felt like I was in this weird limbo state. I was too American to be Chinese, but too Chinese to be American. In America, people can get hate crime for speaking their native language in the streets. But on the flip side, a few days ago, my dad told me about how some Chinese Americans were cursed at to go back home in China when they were speaking English. I belong in both places, but I also belong in neither. So us Asian Americans really have to carve out our own space.
Like Reena, I'm also a Chinese American who was born in the US. However, I'm a second generation immigrant. When I was younger, I was fluent in Cantonese, which is a dialect of Chinese. But now I can barely speak the language and I can understand a little bit. I know enough to tell my grandma I'm full when she asks me if I want more food. I do eat Chinese food at home, but not exclusively. And even though I know how to use chopsticks, I prefer forks. I'm proud to be both Chinese and American, and I love both cultures, even though I might not be as connected to my Chinese side as Reena is. However, like Reena, I also feel that I'm too American to be fully Chinese and too Chinese to be fully American. But I feel like being too Chinese to be fully American is more impactful for me than being too American to be fully Chinese. And I guess this also goes back to the thing I said about being a perpetual foreigner. And even though I was born and raised in the US and I've never been to China my entire life, I still get ignorant and racist encounters. For example, once I was in an airport in Arizona and I was talking to a cashier. She first complimented my English. English is the only language I speak fluently, so I was a little confused why she was complimenting me on that. Second, she asked where I was from, so I said New York City. She thought I was touring the US and I was visiting New York City after I left Arizona, which is obviously completely wrong. She then believed I was going back to Japan after I visited New York City. It was so ignorant and racist of her to assume that I was from a different country just because of how I look. She even guessed the country wrong. This is the type of racism that I think Asian Americans face the most, but then again, I can only speak from personal experience.
Thank you for sharing. It was very interesting. Hi again, my name is Steve, and my question is, why do different Asian American families have different experiences in America?
So there are many different reasons. The first one is that Asian immigrants have a very important decision to make. Do they raise their children with their native culture or do they assimilate? I want to make it clear that this is not an either or situation. It's more like a spectrum of assimilation that immigrant families can fall anywhere on. From there on, each generation has to make the same decision, and this gets more complicated when interracial marriages are introduced. Every person's choice is unique, so as a result, the Asian American experience evolves with each generation born in the US. The second reason is that every immigrant has unique circumstances. They come from different countries, they come for different reasons, they bring different skills to the US, they come with different amounts of money and property, they settle in different areas of the US, and they can have different experiences with their new American neighbors. And all of these variables complicate the equation. The third reason is that there are different immigration waves, so not all Asian immigrants are the same. For example, my parents immigrated to the US and gave birth to me here. I, as a Chinese American, do not feel a connection to the Chinese railroad workers of the 19th century. When they were building the Transcontinental Railroad, my ancestors were working on a farm in China, and our common ethnicity does not make us have the same Asian American experience.
Yeah, it's just funny that Reena mentioned the Transcontinental Railroad because I do feel connection to that. Something about my great grandfathers actually worked on the railroad. So I, as a Chinese American, do feel connection to that. And I just think that all Asian American families have different experiences due to their own personal history. For example, a first generation immigrant family will definitely have a different experience than a third generation one. And some families are just more connected to their Asian side and others to their American side.
That's really interesting. Hi. How can young people continue to spread awareness about the AAPI community and the hashtag Stop Asian Hate movement?
So I think that young people are uniquely good activists because we have energy and internet skills. We can show up to protests, we can organize, sign petitions, etc. Furthermore, we have an unparalleled mastery of the internet. In this new digital age, the internet is a prerequisite for any social justice movement. So take the George Floyd case, for example. Tragic murders like his have been happening for as long as America has existed. Why is this different? A video of the murder was circulated on the internet, stirring up a nationwide movement to hold the system that killed him accountable. If it weren't for the internet, he would have just been another unaccounted police murder. So this is why we started on the internet with AMP. Instagram is a great way to share information, and I often get much of my social justice news by clicking through people's stories and reading the posts that they share. Similarly, you can share our post on your story or on other social media platforms.
I also think that everyone, no matter their age, needs to educate themselves on current events just to be informed. That can be through Instagram, through New York Times or whatever platform you like the best.
And then finally, do you have anything you would like to say to the viewers watching at home?
Sure. So to our fellow Asian Americans, stay safe out there, but don't let the injustice pin you down. Don't let us become that forgotten, erased model minority. If you don't say something, if you don't take action, we will be ignored as we have been for centuries. To our non-Asian viewers, your actions are also very important. Be a good ally and educate yourself. Don't buy into the model minority. Don't ignore us. Stand up for your Asian peers, and we need to present a unified front to make any change. Also, please follow us on Instagram at Asian_Mythbusters_project. Thank you.
Thank you for your information and advice, Reena and Olivia. Thank you so much for coming on our show. We love hearing Reena's speech and talking about your organization and the AAPI community. We can wait to see what's next for you two. Those were all enlightening answers. We hope to talk to you again soon. And thank you for tuning in. Stay safe. We see you next time on Open 2.0. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.